Hello, friends and nonprofit leaders. It's me, Laura Zelke, your host of the Your Nonprofit Life podcast. After what feels like the slowest 8 months of my life, I have to say that November flew by, and it's hard to believe the election is over, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade happened with no crowds, and Giving Tuesday is already a memory. Now, as we're officially in the middle of this most unique holiday season, I thought it would be important to take some time and honor nonprofits who serve people during some of their most emotionally tender times. You know, whether it's from natural causes, tragedy, or even the pandemic, I'm sure we all know someone who has suffered loss this year. And one of the most significant losses a person can experience is the loss of a spouse. And sometimes when you're the close friend of a widow, or maybe the sister of a widow, you swoop in to help them in the short term. But then how do you continue to support your friend over the long haul? Sadly, what happens with many of us is that we don't know what not to say. So rather than say or do the wrong things, we kind of say nothing. We back off. We say, call me if you need anything. We give space. Is the space that we're giving helpful? Is it really for the best if we don't mention the name of the spouse when we're together? You know, rather than Google the answer to these questions, how about I introduce you to my guest on today's episode? Marina Mitchell is the founder and executive director of Sacred Share, an organization created to assist the burdens of our sisters and girlfriends who are grieving the loss of their spouse and to share with others the treasure that's walking alongside these widows in their pain. Marina comes from a humble background. Her parents were entrepreneurs and raised her and her siblings in Northern California. You could say her life was sheltered, but then after visiting one of her relatives in another country, Marina realized anything was possible. Listen to Marina's journey into the nonprofit sector and be inspired by this woman who learned how to walk with widows and now spends her life helping other women, like me, maintain strong relationships after the death of our friend's spouse. Hey, have you ever wished you could hear some good news for a change? Well, I might have just what you've been hoping for. Welcome to Your Nonprofit Life, where we remove our rose-colored glasses and explore what leaders are actually doing to move their nonprofits from messy to thriving without burning out in the process. I'm Laura Zelke, Director of Member Experience for the Nonprofit Leadership Lab. Join me each week to explore the ups, downs, and whoopsie daisies of your nonprofit life. Let's get started. Well, hey, Marina, it's so nice to see you and your beautiful virtual background you have going on there behind you. It's wonderful to have you on the Your Nonprofit Life podcast. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm really good. I had a good walk this morning. The weather is perfect. So that always puts me in a happy mood. But thank you for having me. This is fun.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Now, you were telling me the viewers can't see it, but this is the view from your husband's office. And you're in Texas, right?
I am. We live in Austin, Texas. And so you can see it, Laura, but nobody else can see it. But this is a view of downtown. It's a pretty cool space.
You know what? I'll have you send me the picture and then we can put that up on the show notes page. But it's interesting. I'm going to have to show this to my son because it looks like one of the buildings was built in Minecraft.
You're not wrong.
It kind of does. Yeah. So it's a little interesting. So we're recording just a couple days after Halloween. And I was curious. I know you have a number of children. Did you guys do anything for Halloween?
So this year was super strange, right? 2020.
Right.
Honestly, I told the kids we're not doing trick-or-treating. That's not happening. Don't even bother with the costume. That's a no-go. Every single one of my kids is definitely doing a costume. I have 5 daughters and 3 nieces. So all 8 of them were like, we are doing something.
Oh
and I was saying, we're not doing anything. We're doing nothing. But my husband, who's the fun one, he ended up taking a few of the girls. My niece, you know, she doesn't have a dad. So she was very, very adamant that her uncle was going to take her to get a costume. And he did, of course. So she's the only one who got like an actual costume, and then everybody else had to scrounge and figure out. I really didn't think people were going to do trick or treating.
Yeah.
And of course, I told him that, and he said, Marina, we live in Texas. This is where the rebels are. There will definitely be trick or treaters. And he was right. There were. They passed out bags of candy, like prepackaged. Everybody had like tables set out with prepackaged bags of candy. So all the kids got bags, like every time they went somewhere, it was a bag full of candy, not just one item. So they ended up with tons more than normal.
Yay for sugar rush, right?
It'll last us through the end of the year.
Yeah, I was thinking on Saturday night about 6:00, I'm like, we probably ought to just, I don't know, put something out in case there are people that trick or treat. I don't want to be completely unprepared. And my son had bought a couple bags of candy. And yeah, we did have a few trick or treaters. And so again, we usually do like a homemade costume. And some years he's made Minecraft costumes. And last year he was a character from the Dragon Prince cartoon show.
Okay, right.
He was one of the kings. And then this year, though, he was just lost. And so he flipped his baseball hat around and put a backpack on and grabbed some Pokemon. And he was like a Pokemon guy. And so when the kids would come to our door, he had like this long tube and he would put the candy in and aim it down into their basket. So the little kids loved it.
They loved it.
I mean, we probably had 1/10 of the kids that we usually have.
Wow. I don't know, because I ended up doing the same thing. I made bags thinking this is what people are doing. And I just put them out on a table out on the sidewalk in front of our house. And all of the bags were gone. And then my husband was like, we need to put more stuff out. I need a bowl. I'm like, people are not going to be reaching into a bowl. So we ended up with a giant bowl of candy still left over, but all the bags are gone.
Well, there you go. He didn't have that pre-planned at all, I'm sure.
Never.
Well, I didn't actually ask you on here to talk about Halloween, but we're trying to not think about the election, which is tomorrow. So just forgive us, listeners, that we indulged a little bit talking about Halloween here. So Marina, tell us a little bit about your organization. I already gave like a brief introduction, but if you could just briefly tell us about Sacred Share, that would be great.
We work with widows and their support networks, like their family, their coworkers, their neighbors, whoever is in their community. What we really want to do is help see widows get to the other side of the terror of loss, because there really is the terror of that trauma that many, and I would say most of them, do experience. And while we do work with widows, really our desire is to work more so with their community and help people understand how to walk alongside them and their families after loss and what is meaningful, impactful. And, there's so many people who, after they go through loss, they lose friends and their family relationships fracture. And I personally just don't think that is necessary.
Yeah. And so you're going to help talk us through that. And before we get into the deep dive, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your journey into the nonprofit sector. Like, was this something that you knew you wanted to do, like when you were a kid? And are you from Texas?
Okay. I am not from Texas. I am actually, don't tell anybody who lives here. I'm from California. My husband is from Texas, though. That's why we're here.
Okay.
Or how we ended up here, I guess I should say. So I was actually born in true Northern California, up in a place called Humboldt County, which is up actually near the border of California and Oregon, up in the mountains. I was the firstborn to a couple of hippies.
I will tell you that I have a memory of vacationing up there one time.
Really?
Yeah, we vacationed in Garberville or up in that area. It was really close. And I will never forget, because I remember my dad stopping and asking a woman for directions, and she was in a really pretty sundress. And when she lifted up her arm to point,
I know what you're going to say.
Let's just say that I had never seen that before, with a woman having so much hair in her armpits. And I was like, I don't know if it traumatized me or if it just marked me for life. No, I'm just teasing. It didn't traumatize me, but it's like one of those memorable moments. where I could tell you where the sun was, where our car was, and where the lady was standing, holding up her arm with all that armpit hair, pointing us. I'm telling you, I know it's hippie country up there. Like true north, like you said, true Northern California, total hippie country. So you were raised there, huh?
I was even raised further north than Garberville.
Oh, wow.
But yes, that is where I was raised. It's beautiful, beautiful country, very near the coastal redwoods. Mm-hmm. It's magical. It's still my favorite place on the planet. My dad has 20 acres up in the mountains, and that's where I was born. And I actually was born on a reservation that is near there, the Hoopa Reservation. But that's where we grew up. We grew up right by the Trinity River. I mean, honestly, I think that we can look back on childhood, and I choose to do it this way. I look back on it. It was very magical, quite rural.
Yes.
As you can imagine. So both of my parents, well, they were hippies, but they were both entrepreneurs. In fact, my mom did not even graduate high school, but owned 3 different businesses of her own in my lifetime that, you know, as growing up. And my dad owned his own business. And so that's just sort of how we grew up. You just took care of business because you had to. And that really was just the way they survived. So growing up, I think in that environment, just with an entrepreneurial mindset and sort of an entrepreneurial spirit, I think I just sort of always grew up knowing that, oh, I'll probably do something like that just because that's what you do, not, you know, for no other reason.
Right. You weren't thinking of a career 9 to 5, go punch a time clock somewhere.
Definitely not. Although, you know, what is interesting is that when I was in college and that age, you know, my early 20s, because it was so different than what I grew up with, I really thought, and I remember this is like your armpit imprint. I remember I was in the Bay Area in California, the San Francisco Bay Area, you know, Cisco is there. And I remember having this thought, this like, if I can just get a key card with my picture on it that gives me entrance to one of these office buildings, I have made it.
And now you're running a nonprofit.
I realized, oh, this is not it. I don't need to work for Cisco.
No, that's not it.
So before I moved to the Bay Area, like how did I even get there? So I lived in Humboldt County, and from there, I had an aunt and uncle living in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And I was sort of floundering. I was in college and like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. My parents were like, if you want to go, go. If you don't, don't. Like I said, my mom didn't even graduate high school.
There was no emphasis. Right. There was no emphasis on doing that.
And she was in the throes of running her business, you know, like she had 2 stores that she was running and just like, whatever you want to do, do. I'm like, well, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was 17 years old. Well, my aunt called and said, would you like to move to Argentina? I will fly you down here. I will put you in school. Sign me up. So I flew to Argentina and I lived with my aunt and uncle and my cousins and had a whole incredible experience living there, meeting people from literally all over the world. In fact, I was one of 2 Americans in the school I went to.
I was going to say, so you left Humboldt, hippie County, California, and moved to Buenos Aires, Argentina. And that's the capital, huge isn't city. It? Mm-hmm. Wow. So that was quite a culture shock. I can only imagine.
What is fascinating to me, this has always been fascinating, is while I felt lonely, I remember feeling lonely and homesick for my mom when I lived there. I did not feel this culture shock. For some weird reason, I felt like I am home, which is weird because why would I feel that? I have no idea. Just the culture felt at home to me. It's very Latin, Italian. The food, the way they speak their language, Castellano, it's very Italian, the way they drive. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. I'm not Italian. I'm not even Latin at all as far as I know. Except my name could be.
I got to interject something here real quick because that's how I felt when I moved to North Carolina.
Interesting.
And I was like, I'm home.
That is fascinating.
It is. Well, my aunt and uncle were in furniture, and High Point, which is really close to where we live, is the furniture capital of the world. And the EPA laws were getting so bad in San Francisco that they moved their factory out here. Well,
okay, right.
So when we moved here, you know, we didn't move here to be with them, but it was kind of like this bonus that we knew that they were here and we could at least know someone. But I'm telling you, the first time we came out here, I was like, this feels like home. And then I did one of those DNA tests from Ancestry. And would you believe that I have some distant relatives that were literally married here where we live, right in the next county, which is about 5 minutes away from here. So maybe,
there's something to be said
there is
about, what is that, like epigenetics?
Yeah, something. So maybe you have
maybe I do
a bigger family history than just your aunt and uncle. But anyway, I interrupted you. So you were telling us you flew down there. They moved you down. She said she was going to put you in school.
Right. So I was attending Lincoln University is what it was called. And it was the university, and I use that in quotes, for really a lot of expats. But again, I was one of two Americans. Everybody else that went to the school, other than the large Argentinian population, they were all students from all over the world. A lot of students from ambassadors or, kids of ambassadors or kids of, different companies where they went to live there to work, which was completely outside of my world. Like, it was so outside of what I grew up in. Like, this is so outside of the context of what I knew, but it just felt amazing. And getting to know people from all over the world was such a gift. And from living in Argentina then, my visa was expiring, so I had to go back to the States. And there was no way I was going back to Humboldt County. Again, I love that place, but I just knew I can't go back.
Right.
So I ended up moving to the San Francisco Bay Area, which my grandmother lived there. And I had quite a few family members who lived there. And so that's sort of where I then entered the world.
Right.
And living there, that is actually when I did experience culture shock. And I was like, this is the definition of what culture shock is. It was so different. When I lived in Argentina, there was something about it. It just felt like family. Mm-hmm. Everything felt cozy and innocent. And I don't know why, it just did. It was a gift that I got to move there. Mm-hmm. And then I moved to the Bay Area, which of course is where I met my husband, got married very young. They told us, don't get married, don't do it. You're too young. I think we were 25.
Oh gosh.
You're going to regret it for the rest of your life. Bay Area.
At 25?
Oh yeah. In fact, you know what? We had our first daughter. I think we were 25 or 26 when she was born. Must have been 25. And all of our neighbors were having their first kid as well, but they were all in their 40s.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a very different culture. Mm-hmm. And it's much younger out here in North Carolina, I have to say.
For sure.
People get married much younger.
I think that's probably true here too.
Yeah.
In Texas. I don't know.
But it is interesting. Different areas have a different cultural vibe to it. I can see that the cultural experiences that you've had in Buenos Aires and in the Bay Area of San Francisco would really prepare you to be helping a variety of different people and kind of have that mindset of understanding how cultures are so different depending on where you're at. So you met your husband there. Now that was all in California though, and you're now in Texas. Did you start your organization when you were in California, or when did you start it?
We started 2 years ago. We incorporated here in Texas.
Okay.
So we are currently serving geographically widows in Central Texas and in the Bay Area in California. By and large, that is because we lived there for so long and we have so many ties there. And our board president is in the Bay Area.
Okay. And let me ask you this, because if I'm not mistaken, which I know I'm not, you're the founder. So what was it that brought you to a place that you decided to start a nonprofit?
Okay, so let's see. So about 11 or 12 years ago, I went with a girlfriend of mine to India, and it was a humanitarian project that we were going on. She and I went, and then a friend of hers, he was a nurse. So the three of us went, and we went there and visited several leper colonies and several regions outside of Hyderabad. And when we came back, she decided to start a nonprofit to help lepers.
Oh, wow.
Worldwide, but really specifically in India.
Okay.
As well as here in the US. And so when she did that, and again, this is like probably 10 years ago, I wish I could remember exactly, but when she did that, I remember going through that process with her, not of starting the nonprofit. I wasn't really involved. I was just her friend, and I knew that she was doing it. But seeing her go through that process and just really encouraging her in it and knowing that, of course, you're going to do this. This is so on your heart to do and help these people. And it was such an incredible experience. I remember someone said to me, I think you're going to start a nonprofit. And I remember thinking, yeah, I could do that.
I love
because
that.
having, grown up with these entrepreneurial parents, I think I just sort of always like, yeah, I could do that, if I wanted to.
Right.
Yeah, I could do that. I could, whatever it is. I just sort of always have thought, yeah, I could probably do that. And it's probably because of my dad, honestly. Like, that's my dad. So fast forward, we moved to Austin, Texas. And about, a year after we'd been living here, maybe 2 years, my brother-in-law died. Now, my brother-in-law, he was 33 when he died. And my sister and I are extremely close, very, very close. So she was in California and I was here. He died, and about 8 months after he died, my sister was really struggling, and my husband was on this, like, we've got to get her over here. She's got to move in with us. So my sister and her kids ended up moving in with us for a year. And I literally walked alongside her through that whole year and got to witness firsthand in my home what it looked like and felt like to be right next to a grieving person. And I remember being with her and just sort of witnessing her and her interactions with her kids and thinking to myself, this person is not my sister. Like, I don't know who this person is. This is weird. And yet I know it's not weird, but what is happening? Each year for 4 years prior to that, I had a close friend whose husband died. And I remember each one of those times, the way that I interacted with my friends after the death of their husband. I remember the feelings of just like helplessness and hopelessness. Like, what can I even say? I remember being the person who called my girlfriend on the phone and said, I just heard the news. I'm so sorry. I'm devastated. What can I do? To a message machine, and never hearing back from her because of course she's not going to call me back because she has no idea what I can do for her. I didn't know any of that, leading up to this period of time when my sister lived with us. And it wasn't until she lived with us and I began doing research on my own. I started looking into PTSD and I started looking into, trauma and the aftermath of trauma. He died traumatically. I started looking into just what does grief actually look like? And I just started educating myself in order to better be able to walk alongside her. It has always been in my heart to walk with people and to give people the benefit of the doubt. But I think probably like most founders and probably most people who end up in the nonprofit sector or in work where they're just giving so much, I think with probably most people, it's because they've been led there because of life circumstances or situations that have unfolded that they found themselves in. I can think of different people involved in, helping with cancer patients who found themselves in that work because of personal experiences.
Right.
Or people who are working with, special needs, who have found themselves, not because they initially set out for it, but because, life path has led them that way. So that's how I ended up in this sector. Was my sister, when it was time for her to move out of our home, I began looking into resources to help her. And I specifically sought out religious organizations because it was my understanding that religious organizations are supposed to care for widows. That's part of their
that's biblical. That is what it says. Yeah.
And I was really surprised at how little existed as far as programming within different churches or different religious organizations. Hear me when I say that I'm not saying nothing exists.
Right.
And hear me when I say I'm sure that many organizations seek to serve those people who they consider members. Okay, so I'm not saying that those things don't exist. I just was surprised at how little I found available, as well as just sort of the little things that you don't consider. I remember when my brother-in-law died, how not only did my sister's car insurance immediately increase, but also so did her phone bill. And all of these other things increased because she was no longer a two-person household. She was now a one-person household. Like, head of household was one, not two. So, like when you get married, you get all these benefits.
Right.
Well, then your husband died and you don't get the benefits anymore. And so it just felt like, all these like insult to injury, just things you don't think about because why would you think of that?
Right.
Anyway, that's how I ended up as a founder. I just was looking to fill a need. And then the other part of that what I'm really passionate about is, and this is our tagline, walking with widows, is that, most women in our lifetime, if we marry, statistically speaking, we will be widowed. Now, most of us will not see that. And not that we welcome it or want it, but most of us won't see that until we're much older. So right now in this space of life, most of us are married. If we're married, most of us are married. We don't want to be in that club, right? But what do you do if you're not in that club, but your friend suddenly is widowed? Like, how do you respond? Your neighbor just lost her husband to cancer, or your uncle just fell down a flight of stairs and he died. And now your aunt is a widow suddenly. And, I'm using situations, and forgive me because this is the line of work I'm in, but it can be really grim, but it's real. What do you do? How do you show up for your aunt? Like, what do you say? You don't want to hurt her anymore, so what do you do? And that for me is what I'm really passionate about.
Yeah.
Like, let's help people walk with each other.
Right. What is it exactly that Sacred Share does to help people like me support my friend whose husband died?
I love this question. And really the reality is we're still trying to figure out how best to do it. I sort of come from this mindset where there's always a better way. There's always a better way, which sometimes can shoot me in the foot. But a huge part of it is just putting out content through our social media or, on our website that kind of addresses that and talks about, just different things. And really, you can find that kind of information on our website, and we're going to make sure that you have the resources as well. Walking alongside is just a shift in thinking, and it has to be done on a continuum. There's not just like, oh, if I check off these boxes. Now, there are some resources that we provide that would be like, okay, here at the 1st month mark, here are some suggestions. At the 3-month mark, here are some suggestions. 6 months, 12 months, and so on. There's such a level of commitment that family and friends, coworkers, whoever is, the community really has to just commit to. Like, there's a level of walking alongside that I, as a family member, I just have to commit to this. And what does the love look like? And that's kind of a big deal for us. Like, this is what love looks like. It really doesn't feel very good, and it can be rather inconvenient. But because I love this person, I'm going to do this. One of the things that we have worked with and are working on is trying to figure out, like, if 2020 had been different, which it hasn't been. So there's nothing, like, we can't erase it.
I would say 2020 has been different. It's been really, really, really different, but I know what you mean.
Nailed it. Gosh, yes. I mean, 2020, how many of us did it derail? So many of us, having to pivot and repivot and rework, because it really was going to be a year of, gathering and really educating. So it's such a big piece of educating. The ways that we have done that in the past that has been the most organic to us is these times of gathering. So gathering together in order to create or to help. So people really can feel like they can get behind, oh, I want to help do a food drive or whatever it is. We create meals and then deliver them to widows that we knew who actually had a need for that.
Wow.
So during the gathering and the creating a safe space with widows and then people like me who represent those walking alongside to answer questions, ask questions, and provoke dialogue between those who were coming to help their widowed friends. Like, let me give you an example. We had a gathering where we were making meals. And one of the women who came, she had 3 different women that she knew who had recently been widowed, which is crazy. And she was in this position. She's like, I don't know what to do. I've called them all and I've told them, let me know how I can help. And one of our widows who was there, she said, well, she never called you back, did she? She's like, no, what did I do wrong? She's like, well, here's the reality. She doesn't know what she needs from you, especially if she's in the early stages of loss. How could she possibly know? It's just little things like that we just don't think about.
Right.
Yeah, I have no idea what I'm going to need. I have no idea. So we do provide, when you reach out to us, and most of the people who reach out to us are people who've had friends or family go through loss. It's not typically a widow who reaches out to us. That does happen, but that's not typically it. So they reach out to us and they'll fill out a form, and then our organization will get in contact with you. And we say, okay, what is it exactly that you're looking for? Here's the number one thing: maintain relationship with her. Just maintain relationship. Check in with her. And we'll give some examples of how do you check in. And then, we'll give you like a first steps, next steps. Here's some things that you can do. But we really want to be about relationship, that you maintain relationship with your widowed friend. And we'll check in with you periodically. How's it going? Here's an event that you can participate in. Again, this is what we've done in the past. Would you like to come and participate in this? We're making Valentines for widows. We've had this local florist donate hundreds of roses, and we're going to make Valentines and bouquets. Would you like to participate and take a bouquet and Valentines to your friend? Here's the 5 different things we're doing. And then in the context of that space, continuing to create a safe place for people to ask questions and to gain information on a continuum. So it's kind of organic. We also do offer a widow support group. It's widows only. It's called the Widows Table, and they meet virtually right now, of course, because of COVID, but different groups would meet in person before. So I'm sure that will happen again at some point in the future, but right now we're just doing that virtually.
You know, what I love about your vision, though, is that, yes, there is that local aspect to it of you doing the gatherings in person and those service opportunities. But like, I'm in North Carolina, and my dear friend who lost her husband lives in Northern California, not as far north as Humboldt County. They're in Butte County. But, you know, I still feel connected in that I still want to maintain that friendship, even though I'm all the way across the whole country, you know, and I can't just like go there. But I can do some of the suggestions that you've had of, you know, just checking in. And I think also coming into the holidays and realizing, okay, like for me, this is going to be her first Thanksgiving without him, her first Christmas without him. And it's something that I don't just want to let it slide. Like, I want to be mindful of what I should be doing. And I will say that, you know, here we are, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. I feel very strongly that there are people listening to this podcast right now who have friends who have lost their spouses, lost their life partners, who don't maybe know what the next step is. You know, maybe they took a casserole in week 1 or whatever, you know, but it's just different now. And it's so different. And the fact that you have this space, even that you've made available online, that you have this virtual space for widows. I was able to tell my friend about it and say, you know, you might want to check this out because it's just widows. And she said that she had gone to something, you know, before, but it wasn't right.
Right.
And I think it's because you have witnessed your sister going through this. And I have another follow-up question for you about that relationship, but because you walked alongside of your sister, that you really do have kind of a huge vantage point of actually observing her, not just in your home, but then when she moved out, because it doesn't just end. Like, the loss is there.
Right.
It's really always there. Even if they remarry later, that loss is still there. And having people in your life that knew the partner, knew the husband, you know, I had actually introduced my friends when we were in college and then they got married. And so it's a big loss. And earlier you mentioned something, how you were watching your sister and you came to a point where you were like, who is this? Is this even my sister? Did she ever come out of that phase to where the relationship, like, did it go back or does it just move forward?
Good question, Laura. So for my sister, no, she never went back. She moved forward. And from what I've witnessed and the research that I have done, that is the way it goes. Trauma, which a loss of this nature, when you lose your life partner, that is traumatic. It rips the rug right out from underneath you. And what happens, and we don't really think about this. I mean, I think about it only because this is the space that I find myself working in. But what we don't tend to think about is, and you mentioned this, it's all of the moments after. It's not just the first Thanksgiving and Christmas, but then it's the second and the fifth and the seventh. And it's all the traditions that you had and all of the dreams and what you were going to do with your future has now completely been altered. Because when you begin to build a life with your life partner, you're bringing both of your desires into it, both of your visions, you know, both of what it is that you want, and you mesh those together. And then when half of that is ripped away, it doesn't just affect right here and right now. but it affects the entire trajectory of what you had,
Right.
what you thought was in front of you. And for those who have children still at home, then it is each year, right, of the milestones that your children are then going through where they don't have a father. Their dad is not there for daddy daughter dance. Their dad's not there for the Father's Day event that they're doing at school or church or whatever it is. Their dad's not there for this. Their dad's not there for that. And I think oftentimes these women also feel the sting and the pain of, this isn't fair because I didn't choose this, you know?
Right.
This was chosen for me and it was ripped away. And so there really is a trauma there. And so when people experience trauma, it really can change their personality. It really can change who they are. What I have witnessed and researched is that women move forward. We're incredibly resilient and capable. You said it, the loss does not go away. One of the things that people who, like you, who know the spouse can do is continue to speak about him and his memory. Sometimes I hear this a lot. Women are like, well, well, we work with a lot of women because women are, tend to be more empaths and, want to be the people to step in and help and bring a casserole. And what do I say? And I made a phone call. Okay. So we work with a lot of women in the helping sphere. So they'll say to me, I don't want to make her feel worse, but here's the reality. She already feels bad. You bringing up his name is not going to make her feel worse. She already is thinking about him all the time, or her. She's already thinking about her life partner. She's already thinking about this person who's been in her life. It's not going to make her feel worse. In fact, how many times do I hear, say their name, say their name. We want to remember this person. Our kids need to remember. We need the memories. We know it's hard. We talk a lot with our nieces about their dad. And they didn't even know him because the twins were 1.5 years when he died. They don't remember him, but we pull out photographs and we talk about him and we reference, oh my gosh, your dad, that's exactly what your dad would have done. Look at that, look at this picture. Oh, can you see how your face, when you make this look on your face, you look just like your, things like that. Laura, one thing I did want to mention as a resource, and you had talked about, we're in this global pandemic and there's so much loss right now. One of the resources that we have listed is the Black Women's Widowed Empowered organization. And they're incredible. They're a nonprofit. They're an incredible group of women, and they are specifically for Black and Brown widowed women. They adhere to all women of color, but there's something very specific that Black and Brown women encounter in loss. And if you look at the psychological aspects after loss, in this category, in this space alone, statistically, we already know that women are far more likely than men to be widowed, but they are more likely to not seek therapy after the fact. They're more likely to not discuss loss after the fact. And so I specifically wanted to mention that. It will, again, it's one of the resources that we offer, but we do work with minorities, of course. I mean, we do work with people of color all the time.
I appreciate that you're bringing this up, though, because I've personally been doing a lot of work in this area, and I just recently interviewed. Now, by the time this comes out, it will be, a couple months back, but I just interviewed Alana C. Brown, and she is running a nonprofit in Washington, D.C. in wards 7 and 8, where she's specifically helping women of color as a woman of color. And she really underscored the importance of that. And so I thank you for bringing that up, because not every woman of color is going to feel comfortable getting support from an organization, that's more of the white majority culture or presenting white, that they can get from the other. And yet to know that you're trauma informed and that you're also aware of embodied experience of Black and Brown women in this country, that it really makes a difference. And so let me ask you this. What would you consider to be a challenge that you've overcome in your organization or in your nonprofit leadership?
Well, okay, I will tell you, we have been extremely fortunate because before we ever incorporated, I found Joan and the Nonprofit Leadership Lab, and I joined before I even had any idea what I was doing. I think I had a board of directors because you need that in order to incorporate, right? And I knew that's the direction we were going. I would say one of our big challenges is my ignorance as a founder and not really understanding how, where to get good board members and then the role of those board members. And I remember at one stage, I had done all the work. We had done our articles of incorporation. We've done everything. I had made sure we had board contracts, and I was following so much of what Joan has in the lab, and sending all the documents to everybody before they join, and everybody's signing stuff, and we're just like, oh my gosh, we're doing this thing. And we got to a point several months in where I talked about the fiduciary responsibility of each of the board members, as well as referenced, remember the board contract you signed and your give. And every single one of the board members looked at me as if I had, a cantaloupe growing out of my head or something. Like they had no idea what I was talking about, even though
they signed
they read those papers and they.
Oh, man.
Honestly, it was a really great learning experience for all of us to walk through together and acknowledge to one another, you know what, none of us have any idea what we're doing, but we know why we're doing it. And so we're going to keep moving forward with this and we're going to figure it out. And so that has just been the way we've been dealing with the difficulty of having no idea what we're doing, is just continuing to put one foot in front of the other and extend a tremendous amount of grace to each other. Our board of directors is all about ready to renew or jump their terms on the board. And I'm not on the board, which is great. And our board president is amazing, phenomenal lady, and she's a widow herself. And that's really important for us that we have both widows and those who walk alongside with that experience on the board, and then those as volunteers who are actually helping us like in an executive manner, but really just extending a tremendous amount of grace towards each other and believing the best. I choose to believe the best about every single person that's on the board and every single person that we work with, people who are helping us with our CRM or whatever it is, all the operational things that I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm going to figure it out, but I'm going to choose to believe the best. And so that's what we do. And we call each other up higher, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think it's a conscientious choice that you have to make.
Absolutely.
It's a values-driven choice because it is so easy to get discouraged, and you have to have the right board members. You have to have the right people, as they say, on your bus to be able to lift each other up, because you get one toxic, negative person on your board and it can drag everything down. So it sounds like you're modeling the kind of leadership where you lift each other up. And I love the idea of extending grace. I'm a huge Brené Brown fan. I think it's becoming my new goal to mention her in every single podcast. Maybe someday they'll be like, we'd like to have Brené Brown on your podcast. And I'm
there you go.
Oh, I think I can squeeze her in. But she calls it generosity, and it's being generous with your assumptions and understanding that everybody's doing the best they can. And I think that's really a lot about it. And I think in a way, it also translates over to the work that you're doing, because you're asking the friends like me to be generous in my assumption of why. Maybe now this didn't happen with me, but like if I had called my friend and said, hey, let me help you, and they never called me back, rather than going down a negative path with that and making it all about me, to lean into it with curiosity and say, well, maybe I should call and check up on them again, because I don't know what to do, but I know I can call, or I know I can send an email, or like what the easiest thing for me with the time difference and the busy schedule is just to send a quick message on Messenger, just to check in or see how they're doing or whatever. So when I was thinking, as you were talking earlier about the name of your organization, Sacred Share, I'm guessing that the share part is that walking alongside. Is that right?
That it's such a good question. And what a weird name, right? Sacred
I
Share.
love it.
So Sacred Share actually came from my husband and I talking about when I finally was like, I think this is what we need to do. And he's like, okay, well, you need a name. Like, you're right. Oh, dear God, where do we get a name? And so I don't even remember how we landed on this, but we were looking for a name or trying to like come up with it. And we happened to open up the Bible and to the book of Deuteronomy. I don't even know how we landed here, but
Okay.
in the book of Deuteronomy, there is a verse, a scripture that says, I have brought the sacred share for the Levite, the foreigner, the widow, and the orphan.
Wow.
And something about that was a wow for me. It felt right, even though what we were focusing on was widows specifically. I just thought that to me, as far as, and he was actually the one that says, there's your name, Sacred Share. That's what it is. I thought there's something really profound about that. And then I started looking into the word. Well, what does sacred really mean? Like, is this legit? Should we really use this? What does share really mean? And it really is this sacred, almost, this set apart piece of my life, my time, my treasure, my, money, whatever, that I am actually setting aside and sharing with this woman and her family. And it just felt right. And if it's just a widow or the orphan or those who are foreigners or those who are walking in spiritual care, right? The helpers.
Right.
I just felt like, I'll go with it. Let's go with it.
Right.
So that is really where that name came from. And we just stuck with it and it just felt right. Yes, that feels like it embodies what I want us to embody. Yes.
Yeah, it's a beautiful name. And the organization, the mission, it's so needed. And it's so needed everywhere bigger than Austin, Texas, and the Bay Area of San Francisco.
Yes.
And what I love, there are some positive things that come out of this pandemic. And one of them is just so much pivoting to virtual that just explodes
Absolutely.
your reach. It really explodes your reach.
Well, it definitely
so that
normalizes
you're helping,
it, right? It's
yeah,
much more
for sure.
accepted. And people who never
Yeah.
would have bothered figuring out how to go online and do a Zoom call now have, like my grandmother. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, even your grandmother. And how important is it, especially at this time of year, to make sure that we're connecting, even if it's just virtual, even if it's just a phone call. So this podcast is going to come out just after Thanksgiving, and we're going into the December holidays. So many meaningful moments created with family and friends. And sometimes, like with my friend, this is the first.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's like you said, it's every year. It could be the 2nd, it could be the 10th. There's still the sense of loss. And I'm just curious if you have any tips for those of us who are friends of widows during this time.
Okay, so first I'll say this, that we should keep in mind that grief itself is not a problem for us to fix, no matter where your friend is in the stage of grieving. In our Western culture, we have this very individualistic, we're going to solve all of the problems, we're going to fix it all because we're pioneers and we're going to make this happen. But grief is not a problem to be fixed. It's something for us to come alongside and walk in. It's an experience, right? And so one thing that I always say is it really is okay to validate any pain, to validate that this is hard. This being without your life partner at this time of year, it sucks. If she thinks it sucks, guess what? It sucks. If she thinks this is hard, guess what? It is hard. And validating that, it doesn't make it worse or make them more upset. The pain exists. It just validates. I would say, based upon the experience we have from our organization, and again, like I told you, we have a lot of widows that we work with. Meals are good, especially if you have a younger widow who has children at home. Meals are wonderful. That's one less meal that she has to figure out herself, especially when it's crazy and busy. Take her kids. Take her kids. No need to be demanding about it. You can make a phone call and tell her, hey, there's no need for you to call me back. I'm just checking on you. You relieve any kind of a pressure. One of the things that we've done recently, my husband and I, we hired a housekeeper and we, cleared it with this widow and said, are you available to have a housekeeper come over on this date at this time? Great. We scheduled it. Even if you just bring food over and tell her, hey, I'm going to deliver food on Friday and you can freeze it, eat it, throw it away, whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm going to bring it. It's something that she can count on. And if you say you're going to do it, do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If she does have little kids, you know what is a really great thing to do? Help her out with bedtime. Maybe once a week, once a month even. Help her out at bedtime. Those people exist. They have little kids and they are fried.
And so my mind, of course, goes to, well, how do you help someone out at bedtime when we're in COVID? But you can. It's called FaceTime or Zoom or a phone call, even if there's no video, just to read a story to the kids or just to even check in on them. Especially, I would think preteen and teenagers who are grieving the loss of a parent. Just again, what I love about the tips that you're giving is they don't have to do anything. We're not asking them to call us back. And that's where we kind of have to check our own egos at the door. This isn't about us. I mean, yes, we're grieving too, right? But not at that level, not at that level. And the most important thing is we need to not turn it into how bad we're feeling when we're talking to them. Would you agree with that?
100%. 100%. When you walk alongside someone, you're there. You're walking with them. If they fall, you're there. If they stop, you're there.
It's intentional.
100%, Laura. This isn't about, I mean, obviously the work, yes, it's very intentional. And obviously in this work, when you are walking alongside someone who's grieving, exactly what you said, it's not about me right now.
Right.
In this moment, when I'm showing up for you, I'm intentionally showing up to say, I haven't forgotten.
Right.
Here is a basket of whatever. Food. I left it on your doorstep. I'm going to swing by on Thursday at 5 p.m. to take your garbage bins back behind the gate. I'm not going to see you, but I'm just going to do that for you. Just take that off of your list. Do you know what I'm saying? Just little things like that. We had a woman receive a garage door opener from her neighbors, which was amazing because they were watching her out there lifting up her garage and pulling her vehicle in. However, they only bought her the garage door opener. And so we stepped in and we paid for someone to come install it, right? And so part of what we talked about in that with our team, and then in this context of when we're just offering education, is if you are going to offer something like a spa gift card or a dinner out, make sure it's a full circle help. Because if she has small kids, she cannot take advantage of that gift if she doesn't have childcare. And then it's additional stress or it's additional money. And
then there's this obligation and you feel obligated. Yes. It's not helpful. And that's why
it's not helpful.
I love your tips because like you said, full circle or gift with no expectation of return. And the gift can be a phone call, just checking in, and that you let them off the hook at that moment. You don't need to call me back or you don't need to respond to this text. I just want you to know that I'm thinking about him. I'm thinking about you. Or I remember that time when we, went to Herschel's and got brownies and, just a little, hey, I remember. And I love this. And I know you have a lot of tips and stuff on your website. And so what's the best way for people to get in touch with you? Is it through your website?
You can find us, of course, on Facebook. We have a Facebook page. You can find us sacredshare.org, info@sacredshare.org. You can send us an email. You can give us a phone call, 512-640-9687. Our Instagram page is a great place. People reach out to us there all the time. So those are probably Facebook, Instagram, and our website.
Okay.
Those are the main.
That's great. And I'll put links to all of that on the show notes page so that it'll be really easy for people to get in touch with you, and probably put a link over to your LinkedIn if you have a LinkedIn account, just so that people can get in touch, because I have no doubt that there are people listening who really are going to benefit from the services that you're providing at Sacred Share. And I hope that you continue to grow your reach and continue to share the ideas, because it's not anything that's just limited to local. Like for me, again, I'm in North Carolina. My friend is in California, and yet there are things that I can do. I can't go take her garbage can out. Like that ain't going to work.
Right.
Right. But there are things that I can do, like, sending a gift card for DoorDash or, sending some flowers on a special day or just checking in.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you for that. And thank you for the extra long interview. We kind of went long, but I love it. And I'll tell you why, because you gave some really practical tips to help. So you actually were doing the work. Like this wasn't just a little fun interview. You actually did some work here, girl. So now you can go take the rest of the night off.
All right. Laura said.
Just tell your husband, tell him,
Done.
You've done your work for the
Clocked
day.
out.
Yeah, it's all his now. But anyway,
thank you so much, Laura. Thank you. I so appreciate you. I really do. We're so lucky that we get to interact with you on a regular basis.
I feel like I'm the lucky one that just has the opportunity to be in such great company. I'm very spoiled. Thank you very much. And I will see you in the village.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening. To access the show notes or share feedback on this podcast and link over to our socials, visit our website at yournonprofitlife.com. That's yournonprofitlife.com. And hey, if you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you're going to love The Village. It's our exclusive online community where we take what we're learning in the Nonprofit Leadership Lab and apply it. We take it to the next level with live Q&As, boot camps, online book clubs, and legit support from experts committed to helping you extend your nonprofit life. By the way, since we're just getting started, it would mean the world to us if you'd subscribe to the podcast and leave a great review on iTunes. The reviews will help us get the podcast in front of more people as we try to take the whole sector from messy to thriving. See you next time.